Good afternoon, everyone. Conscious, it's a session after lunch, and if you're feeling like me, we're all feeling a bit, so I'm going to do my best to make it quick and not bore you too much. I do want to make a start to say I have a famous name, so if you're thinking that Ross Kemp was going to be joined by Amir the boxer, I'm going to have to disappoint you. Although I have been told I have a slightly stronger chin, so we'll let you make a judge of it afterwards. But no, today I'm going to be talking about how to tackle the disconnect between email security and risk management. I spoke about it on a similar topic last year. We've actually done a research again into essentially how best to manage this. But rather than going into another product demo, we've actually, as I mentioned, conducted a series of research across 200 IT leaders like yourselves, and equally 2,000 employees across the US, the UK, and the EU to find out what the biggest priorities are when it comes to cybersecurity. So essentially, what we saw was only 24% of cybersecurity professionals feel like they are well aligned when it comes to where they are spending their money to the perceived risks, which kind of surprised us. We had to kind of go back and do the research again just to make sure that we got it right, and the stats were very similar. What we're seeing is IT leaders are sometimes more focused on the perceived risks than the actual risks when it comes to cyber spending. And that could just be because of the influence of the market, it could be marketing stuff as well. But that was quite surprising because for me, obviously, in order to know where to spend, you need to know where the problems lie. So we essentially went back and we said, actually, what do you deem as your biggest security risks? And what we uncovered was essentially it's these following stats. So employees using unauthorized platforms, that was 38%. I actually had the pleasure of doing so myself this week. We had a bit of an incident where something led to the system being down, and I had to send a file to the event organizers here. So the easiest way for me to do that, and I'm going to say it, and you can hit me and you can throw tomatoes at me, but I used WeTransfer because it was easy. I also had a message from the IT manager within 0.3 seconds of doing so. But I had to use it out of necessity, not because I was being malicious, but because I had no other choice. Or so I thought, according to the IT manager. But the other one is a lack of awareness when it comes to understanding security by employees. We're all very fortunate, we're all very tech literate, and cybersecurity professionals like yourselves will always know what to do and what not to do. However, we can't expect every single member of our organization to have the same level of essentially cyber awareness, which makes sense. The other one was increasing number of data sharing and collaboration tools. As I said, I learned to my own benefit that we shouldn't be using them, and I won't be using them, I promise, unless something comes up again. And then too many separate security solutions, a lack of integration, for example. Look, I'll be the first one to admit there is a much of a muchness out there when it comes to providers. Everyone's got a solution that's going to change the game. So do we. But essentially what you want is a solution that integrates and plays nice with the rest of your cybersecurity setup. And that's essentially the big thing that I took away from it was there are just too many tools for people to kind of stay on top of. So we went further into our research. We essentially asked the employees, so the 2,000 employees we asked to say, what are the biggest mistakes when it comes to emails? And this is what we got, which was sending the email to the wrong attachment. It's quite high. Sending an email to the wrong person, another one. Personal uses as well. I promise I haven't done that yet. And the use of CC and BCC. But I actually want to do this slightly differently. What I would like to do is to test you guys to see if any of you have fallen foul of this. So please can I ask you to raise your hands if you've ever emailed the wrong person or sent something to someone that you shouldn't have. That's definitely more than 33%. I was giving you guys too much credit. What about emailing the wrong person? I really hope this is being recorded. It's going to be leverage. And then personal emails? That's a lot lower. Thank God for that. That's lower. And the last one, actually, which has gone up by 89% in the latest ICO report, the use of CC and two-field as opposed to BCC. Now, you guys are just being shy now. Or you're here with your managers. Look, it's the same thing. I understand. Mum was waiting outside, so I'm not doing it. No, but thank you very much for being honest. Like I said, we're meant to be the leaders in this space. We should know what we're doing. But like the rest of your colleagues, the rest of your employees, you're very busy. You have a day job, right? And sometimes you need the aid of technology to be able to do the right thing. But it goes back to the previous point. It has to be integrated. It cannot be that you have a separate solution that looks after one part of your business. And that is essentially what I wanted to focus on today. So essentially what we saw was this was the focus from those said IT managers when it came to protecting the organization. A lot of people cited the data access bill and the cybersecurity resilience bill, which obviously came into effect this year, as a way of benchmarking where they need to be and essentially what they need to do. And essentially what we saw was the data protection was quite high on the agenda. In fact, 31% of the people that we asked said it was their top priority because of the incidents that we kind of just admitted to doing. But the other thing that I want to mention as well was the data, protecting the data within collaboration tools. I think that's the other thing as well. And there's no more data going out than any other tool than your email. I think we all know that we all need to use email. I think the amount of times I've spoken to cybersecurity professionals and they said if there's one thing they could stop, it would be email. That's one way to get a business shut down early. But essentially, it's a necessity. Email is essentially king when it comes to communication. But email is inherently, essentially insecure because the whole point of it is getting information from A to B really quickly. I mean, I've spoken to countless organizations in the last 4.5 years I've been at Zivver, and the solution to stopping misaddressing of emails is switching off autocomplete. And then you ask the following year, has that reduced the number? No. Has it annoyed a lot of people in your organization? Yes. How do the people do it now? They just copy the wrong email from the wrong file into the email. So it doesn't really solve anything. And I think that's what I wanted to focus on, was having technology be essentially an enabler rather than essentially a blocker when it comes to sharing the sensitive information that you have. So the key takeaways from this report that we did for us and even for you guys was essentially expand the focus. It can't just be point solutions for point problems. It has to be a more holistic approach. The next one is align your investments when it comes to essentially where you put the money. What we saw from our report was actually 24% of IT managers feel like they're actually correctly aligned, whereas 64% focus more on perceived risks rather than actual risks. And again, that could be various reasons. We did unfortunately get that data. And the last one is transform awareness. And I think this is key for me, and I think this is probably key for this room, is we don't just want to essentially solve a problem by doing it for our people. It's essentially enabling and empowering them to not only learn what the right thing to do is, but actively educate them on what to do so they can do it themselves. And that is essentially what we've done with one of our key customers. I can actually now name them. It's Manchester City Council. They put us in for that reason alone. 8,000 people. And what they were doing when it came to cybersecurity measures was, again, quite rudimentary. They spoke about the fact that there'll be training, holistic training for everyone, sometimes Microsoft Teams based. Attendance was optional, unless you, in the last 6 weeks, have caused a massive data breach, then you have to be. And some of the other things were putting signs up in toilets. That was honestly the second thing. After training individuals to do the right thing, the second thing that they mentioned was putting posters up in toilets to tell people to look, check, and then send again, which I laughed at because if I saw a sign in the toilet that said, look, check, I'd be slightly worried. But again, it seemed to have not been working for them. But we've been essentially been able to help them. I'm not going to read the quote out because it's quite a long quote. But to summarize it, essentially, human error will always be a problem. For as long as humans exist, it'll be a problem. I want to use a quote from another DPO who met, not at Manchester. It was about 3 years ago, still my favorite conversation today. I told this data protection officer, Zivver can help reduce the number of data breaches you have that are caused by human error. And their response was forthright, and she said, you cannot eradicate human error without eradicating the human. Which, I see a few nods, which is worrying, because we don't want to commit mass murder, hopefully. Because trust me, I've been there on the other side of the IT manager's bad books as well. But essentially, that's what we can help with. How do we do it? We essentially have a one-stop shop for your emails going in and out. And what I mean by that is we have machine learning-based business rules. Conscious to use machine learning and not AI, because if I hear it one more time, I'm going to lose my mind over it, because everything is AI. It's machine learning-based business rules to prevent misaddressing of emails. We build essentially a bubble around your individual to see who they typically communicate with, what do they do, who do they send it out to. And if they do anything outside that norm, we educate them with a banner in email which tells them you're about to do something that you haven't done before. I almost call it a speed bump. It slows people down enough. And the best way to describe it is Zivver allows for a DPO to be present on everyone's shoulder as they're about to hit send on an email. So essentially, that's the first part. The ability to send and sign secure documents is another aspect. Why I think that's key is I do it myself. We will communicate with a customer or a partner in email. But when it comes to signing a document, we'll go into a completely separate platform, copy an email from another different platform, and send that across. A, it causes obviously app fatigue because you're constantly bouncing from one to the other, and B, it increases the likelihood of actually copying the wrong individual. Other than that, large files, the ability to send large files, we give you the ability to send and receive. But I don't just want to focus on what we can do for you guys, because you guys wouldn't be around if it wasn't for your customers, your partners, and essentially the people that you service. So we make it really easy for your recipients. We don't force them to essentially create accounts. Multi-factor authentication is being used for everything. We allow that to be used for your secure emails. We make your secure email look and feel like regular email. But I don't want to talk too much about the product, because I'm conscious that's what I want to do outside. So if you want to learn more, we can always talk about it outside. But in the last 18 months, we've also developed the inbound aspect of our solution. So for the last 2 years, when we spoke about outbound, the first question was, do you guys also do the inbound? You've heard of providers like Mimecast and everyone else. So we took that next step to make sure that we had one-stop shop for everything. So Zivver now offers the ability to send securely, but equally make sure that those same employees, are not impacted by malicious phishing attacks, for example. But again, that's something that we can talk about outside. I want to close the meeting out by talking about a customer of ours who essentially approached us with all of those issues. They were using an incumbent solution, which made it really arduous for senders, but more importantly for those recipients. And a council is a really interesting use case. Like I said, we're all members of a council. The thing about the council is it serves anyone from 16 years old all the way up to 80 years old. And those two people will use technology in a very different way. So you can't just blanket an approach and hope it works. I know I have a younger brother, 16 years old, forgets his password for everything, right? I also have a granddad who essentially still has a Nokia 3210. So trying to get both of them to sign up to an account, it's impossible for all the different reasons. So that was essentially what Preston came to us with. They say, look, we have an aging population, and we have a very young demographic as well. How do you make technology easier? That was their first thing. And it was quite refreshing because the council came to us with a problem for their customers rather than a problem for them. But what we also saw was there was actually no advanced DLP or data loss prevention policies in the organization. That was something we were able to help with them. But the biggest thing that we did for them was ensure that the change wasn't huge. We integrated into Microsoft. It meant that people composing emails will continue to compose emails as they would, sending emails as they would, and essentially not have to go out their own way of sending the solution. The other thing that they came to us with was the ability to transfer secure data. I'm sure the data protection officers in the room will tell you that they've been there when they've had subject access requests. I think one DPO told me it's the bane of their life because they have to print everything. We essentially eradicated that issue for them as well because we allowed them to send up to 5 terabytes in a secure manner, which allowed the other side to be able to gain access without creating an account and essentially dealing with the difficult individuals in an efficient manner. But the key thing there was compliance demands, making sure that it was still fully compliant, because it's all good and well putting security technologies in. However, if it doesn't align with the guidance that's been provided by the central government, then it's as good as not having it. And that's what we were able to do. We had a very long POC period. I think I have to say They were burnt by an existing provider, so we spent the time to really refine policies. If you imagine an inbound solution, it can be spun up like that. If you imagine an outbound solution where you have to refine business rules and policies and make sure they are working, that takes slightly longer. And we were willing to invest that time with them because we wanted to make sure that we had the policies correct. They also wanted, as I mentioned, a seamless integration to Outlook, which we delivered. And also an existing solution had to be essentially not touched, which was Barracuda in this case. And we also did that. So we coexisted with a secure remote gateway. And the reason why we were able to do that is because we have a modular product, which means that we don't have to blanket everything and say that you're now covered. We let you choose what you need and what you want. And then just to close things off, we've got a really nice case study with them, which again, we are sharing on our stand. If you do want to know more, please come to stand 5, which is just on the left, past red flags. But not just in the public sector. In the last 2 years, we've made substantial gains in the private sector, especially in the legal field. So we've got the likes of Forsters, which is the top 100 law firm in the UK. Again, moved from a competitive solution. We also have the likes of Sakis, but we work in the housing space, the healthcare space, local and central government. And that is me. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to come to stand 5. Thank you. Cheers.